coronavirus pandemic will cause the worst global economic fallout since the Great Depression.
COVID-19 has been a major shock to the growth prospects of the global economy and the euro area economy.
An economic recession is looming in the wake of COVID-19. The impacts of which are already far worse than the 2008 financial crash and are predicted to get even worse.
I'm now submitting my application for unemployment.
I was recently laid off from my position.
Another 6.6 million Americans filed for unemployment benefits last week.
Governments around the world have stepped in to bail out businesses.
$6.2 trillion. I've never signed anything with a T on it.
Thing is though, we've known this was coming for years. Population growth and intensive animal farming have created a breeding ground for outbreaks like COVID-19. Whether it was avian flu coming from factory farms, MERS being the result of the way we treated camels, SARS stemming from civet cats, and repeated bouts of swine flu from pig farms, we've known about the cause for decades.
In this age of emerging plagues, we now have billions of feathered and curly-tailed test tubes for viruses to incubate and mutate within, billions more spins at pandemic roulette. Let me end with a quote from the World Health Organization. The bottom line is that humans have to think about how they treat their animals, how they farm them, how they market them. Basically, the whole relationship between the animal kingdom and the human kingdom is coming under stress.
It wasn't until COVID-19 that people beyond the scientific community started making the connection.
It's not a coincidence that we talk about avian influenza and swine influenza. Those are the two species that are farmed intensively the most around the world.
COVID-19 has underscored the urgency with which we need to end factory farming.
So we have to ask ourselves, what is the price we're willing to pay to continue to have meat on the menu? Hey everybody, Klaus here. So with the economic cost of COVID-19 so severe, today we're asking the big question. Given how risky meat markets and factory farms are due to pandemic risk, is it worth keeping them going? Has COVID-19 changed the economic case for meat and dairy? Short term, the answer is yes.
This morning, a growing number of major meat processing plants are closed.
22 food processing plants in the U.S. closed due to the pandemic.
Biggest pork producer, Smithfield Foods, shut down its processing plant in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
Facing fears of a nationwide meat shortage, President Trump signed an executive order today to keep processing plants open despite safety concerns.
Dairy farmers have been led to dump their milk.
They're literally emptying it out right into the drain here, 25,000 gallons a day.
It's always been a bit of a struggle, but now it's like, well, we don't know where we're going, don't know what to do.
But long term, has the cost of this pandemic tipped the balance and made the animal agriculture industry too costly for our society? To understand this, we need to start by looking at the value of this industry. The meat industry is worth $946 billion US dollars and the dairy industry is worth $442 billion US dollars. To put that in perspective, they make up 1.5% of the global economy, which is huge. But as much as they provide jobs and contribute to the economy, this doesn't tell the full story because there are a lot of hidden costs. In economic lingo, these are called externalized costs, basically because they're imposed onto us as consumers without us even knowing. For example, let's take a petrol car. Accidents, air pollution, noise, climate change, and fuel are all externalized costs. Let's look at some externalized costs associated with the animal agriculture industry. Costs we've accepted as a society for years. Then we can see if the newly identified pandemic risk cost could tip the balance and mean we as a society question the very existence of this industry. Externalized cost number 1, subsidies to animal farmers. Dairy farmers are currently begging the government for help amid the coronavirus pandemic. But what many people don't realise is that governments already pour billions of dollars worth of taxpayer money into these industries each year in the form of subsidies. If we look at the US, for example, the meat and dairy industry lobby the government insanely hard to siphon off $38 billion each year in the form of subsidies. Fruit and veg, by contrast, only get 0.04% compared to meat and dairy. And the more you think about these subsidies, the more you realise how manipulative they are, because they keep the retail price of meat and dairy artificially low, while fruit and veg, by contrast, seem eye-wateringly expensive. Externalised cost number 2, the cost to our healthcare system. we need to acknowledge that diets rich in animal products are implicated in the onset of a number of chronic diseases.
And in 40 years of research, we've been able to show that simple lifestyle changes can undo or reverse the progression of the most common chronic diseases, diabetes being one.
Diabetes, cancer, autoimmune issues. Not only do we not need animal products, but they're actually not good for us.
Experts such as Dr. Ornish estimate that if we all adopted a healthy plant-based diet, we could reduce healthcare costs by 75%, which equates to a saving of up to $2.1 trillion per year. But there's an even bigger cost to our healthcare system. Over 80% of the antibiotics produced in the world are fed to animals in factory farms. This is because conditions there are so cramped that without these drugs, animals would die too quickly. The problem is, this is a leading cause of antibiotic resistance, an issue which England's chief medical officer said was the greatest threat to our civilization. Put simply, our continued reliance on animal farming means that modern day healthcare may regress to the state it was in the early 20th century. And if you're thinking this sounds terrible, but it's fine because I only buy local organic meat, well, statistically speaking, this might not be the case.
Over 99% of farmed animals live on factory farms.
Before we look at the pandemic risk, let's look at the third major externalized cost of the animal agriculture industry, the environmental cost. There's been loads of statistics on this, but the most comprehensive analysis was done by researchers at Oxford University. They found that while animal products provide just 18% of calories, they're responsible for a staggering 56% of agriculture's greenhouse gas emissions and use 83% of farmland globally. But why are we talking about these costs? Because we've accepted them for years, right? Well, what's changed with COVID-19 is a realization that there's an even bigger, more devastating cost than all of the above. That is the cost of a pandemic. Obviously, there are the direct costs to our health system and lost output from sick workers. But more importantly, there is the cost of containing the virus, including social distancing. The point is, a pandemic like COVID-19 can bring our entire economy to a halt and shows that there's an externalized cost to the animal agriculture industry that might not be acceptable to us as a society.
This morning, I had to go to a food bank.
And then you've got the mental toll that this takes, the social isolation, which leads to loneliness and all the mental health and physical effects that come from that.
Those who are at-risk relationships, they're now trapped with their abuser. It's a very dangerous time for a lot of people right now.
So the bottom line is this: if an infectious disease from a meat market or factory farm turns into a pandemic once every, say, 5, 10, or 15 years, at what point do we say enough is enough? Can we afford the cost of a pandemic like this again? And if we can't, how can we justify continuing to eat animal products when we don't need to?